Direct peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians are set to begin on Thursday. But with Hamas noticeably absent, can real peace ever be achieved? Is it time for the other players to recognize Hamas? Or could the talks with the Palestinian Authority simply make Hamas less relevant? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Taimur Nabili. It's been almost 2 years since they last met, and in that time the relationship between Israel and the Palestinians has deteriorated even further. Nonetheless, leaders from both sides are now heading to Washington for fresh talks, even as skeptics dismiss the meetings as a waste of time. Israel's ignored the pressure to halt its settlement expansion. The Fatah leadership has threatened to pull out of the talks if that condition is not met. And still, both sides are refusing to even acknowledge the most glaring problem. The elected government of Gaza has been refused a seat at the table. So is the absence of Hamas going to help or hinder the attempts to finalize a two-state solution? Joining me now to discuss the issue are, in Washington, D.C., Michelle Dunn, a senior associate at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. In Cairo, Ezzeddine Shukri Fisher, he's the professor of international politics at the American University in Cairo. And in Ramallah, Diana Buttu, she's a lawyer and a former spokesperson for the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Thank you all for being with us today. Ms. Buttu, can I begin with you, if I might? What exactly do you think is likely to come of these talks when the Palestinian side isn't even fully represented at the table?
Absolutely nothing is going to come of these talks, and that's been made very clear to the American administration. The fact that the Israeli government is refusing to do the basics of halt settlement construction very symbolically means that they have absolutely no intention of actually ending up withdrawing from the West Bank. Why would they build more settlements if the final intention is to actually withdraw from them? So there is nothing that is going to come of these talks whatsoever.
Ezzeddine Shukri Fisher, are you as pessimistic on this as Diana Buttu, or do you think there's a hope? After all, we read in the Yediot Aharonot newspaper only recently that President Obama apparently has demanded that there be some kind of framework agreement in place within a year.
I don't know anyone who's optimistic about these talks. I don't know anyone on the Arab side, on the Palestinian side, or even on the Israeli and the American sides who think that these negotiations are actually going to lead to a peace agreement. It is, in a way, a waste of time. It seems that the American administration, the Obama administration, has done everything that it has been advised by sane people not to do. They were told not to get bogged in details. They were told at the beginning of the presidency not to leave it to the parties to dictate the pace of negotiations. They were asked to take leadership specifically because the parties are incapable on their own to reach agreement, and they have done everything against that. So I don't think it should surprise anyone if these negotiations linger and then lead to nothing, as we have seen before.
Michelle Dunn, then what exactly is Obama doing, do you think? He's taking quite an enormous gamble on his own reputation and perhaps even on the fate of the Middle East by convening this effort.
Well, I agree with Diana and Ezzeddine on this pessimism about what's going to come out of these talks. I'm not expecting anything much either. But I think it is important to try to figure out, well, then why are the Americans doing this? I think that Obama feels that he must test Netanyahu's intentions. The Israeli prime minister has said and has certainly convinced certain parties in the United States that, you know, he has changed, he is willing to be flexible, he's going to surprise people once they get into direct talks. So I think that Obama felt that we had reached a juncture where that had to be tested, and he, you know, put a great deal of pressure, I think, on Palestinian President Abbas to join the talks and put Netanyahu to the test.
All right, well, let me then be the optimist in this group, since no one else is going to be and I'll come back to you, Diana. What exactly is going to happen if there isn't an outcome here? Because Obama is basically saying the situation is now reached the point of no return. And unless something does happen, then we are either going to see an Israeli apartheid state, which a lot of the Israeli leaders already have agreed to and acknowledge is going to happen, or we're going to see the absolute collapse and possible chaos in the Middle East. So from that position, the only way that we can really come out of this is with some kind of conclusion, isn't it?
Well, no. I mean, I think it's a wrong assumption to somehow believe that a peace agreement is absolutely needed. I, of course, want one. But to say that Israel can't continue to operate in the way that it's operated over the course of the past 6 decades is wrong. Israel hasn't been held accountable by anybody under international law. It already is an apartheid state. It's not going to be one. It already is one. And so for Israel, the option at the end of the day is either go ahead with a complete pullout from the West Bank, or continue the status quo. And I think for the Israelis, it's going to be a continuation of the status quo. The real question then becomes, what are the Palestinians going to do in response? And I think in response to that, you're going to see much more effort to boycott Israel, to get divestment, people divesting from Israel, sanctions against Israel as well, and perhaps even calls for a one-state solution.
Ezzedine, is a boycott divestment policy, it's not just the Palestinians who are going to need to make that happen, it's going to be the international community. Is there enough consensus on the part of the international community that Israel needs to be punished for its behavior?
No, I don't think there is a consensus in the international community on this. I think what Diana is describing is what the two sides would be striving to do when the negotiations fail. And I think this gives you a picture of why exactly the United States should step in early and not waste more time. Step in early and provide a vision for peace in the Middle East that actually translates the consensus of the parties themselves, but also of the international community. It's no fun to wait for the parties to degenerate further in violence or in further animosity amongst themselves. It is much better. It makes much more sense. It's more economic that we step in early on. Now is the time. Yesterday is the time. And lay out this vision for peace. The two sides are actually ripe for settling their conflict. I think despite everything we see, there is a majority on both sides that has moved to the center and that accepts the basic tenets of a settlement. 2 states, 67 as base, shared Jerusalem, etc. This is a no-brainer. All what it takes is political leadership, someone who can step in and shoulder the political costs of these compromises and then get the parties to move towards the solution. And this is what the American administration should have done at the beginning, instead of losing 2 years on details and settlement and getting the parties to sit at a table that we know in advance is not going to lead them anywhere.
This
is what they need to do now. They can do it now. They can do it in a month. They can do it in 5 years. It's their choice. But the quicker, the better for everyone in the region in particular.
All right. Well, if we accept your premise that there is such an obvious solution, then the two questions, Michelle, are why exactly is the U.S. ignoring to see that obvious solution? And why exactly are we in the situation that we're in?
I think that it is a possibility that the Obama administration will spell out a plan and spell out a U.S. position on some sort of a comprehensive settlement to the Israeli-Palestinian dispute at some point. Right now, I think they feel they have to give direct talks a chance. They have to give Netanyahu a chance. I'm not sure exactly how much time they will give this. Certainly, I'm sure through the end of this calendar year and certainly past the U.S. congressional elections in November. So they will give it maybe 3 months, 6 months, perhaps a little longer, perhaps as much as a year. But at some point, I think that if this fails, there is indeed a possibility that they will lay out some kind of a plan.
But I want to disagree.
There have been a lot of hints George Mitchell, the U.S. envoy, said recently that the U.S. will be submitting bridging proposals. I think that is paving the way, and I think the Obama administration has tested the waters in some small ways to what would be the response both in the region and in the United States to the United States putting out sort of a fuller peace plan of some kind. I mean, there are 1,000 decisions that would have to be made about how detailed that plan should be and which issues. But one important point, I have to disagree with Izzadeen. I don't think it's as simple as the United States puts out a plan and somehow imposes it and it becomes a reality. Even if the United States puts out a plan, I think there's a very difficult process to be gone through in order to translate that into a solution that both of the sides will accept.
Diana, President Obama went to Cairo. He made all sorts of grandiose promises and attempts to reach out, and ever since then he's had nothing but criticism about how he's failed to deliver on that. He's also had Benjamin Netanyahu apparently, according to the media, besting him on almost every front. Where exactly do you see evidence that at this stage of the game Obama has either the inclination or the ability to twist Netanyahu's arm in this matter?
Well, in terms of inclination, I think it's important to go back to when President Obama was first elected, and one of the things that he said was that he definitely wanted to see a resolution to this, and that he made as his first call a phone call to Mahmoud Abbas. That said, so I don't doubt that there is goodwill there. I don't doubt there's an inclination. What I do doubt is the ability, and the ability in terms of using all of the tools that he has to bring Israel to end its military rule over the Palestinians. And what I mean by that is, the United States gives Israel a lot of support, financially, politically, and otherwise. And it could be very easy for the United States to really put pressure on Israel to, at the very least, end its colonization of the West Bank. But they haven't done that. And this is what leads Palestinians to believe that the United States is either not serious or that they simply don't have the ability or the will to do that.
Izzadeen, Israel doesn't believe it's colonizing the West Bank. Israel believes that the West Bank is Judea and Samaria, and that it has perfect rights to be there, and this is what they call contested territory and not an occupation at all. Where you can't even agree on your terms, how can we agree on going forward?
It's a very good question, but I have to contest what you mean by Israel. Israel is a lot of people. Inside Israel, you have, as I said, a majority that moved to the center, that even if some of them believe that this is Judea and Samaria and God-given, they have realized that the political realities of the world today make it imperative that they share this quote-unquote promised land with the Palestinian people who actually have been living there for quite some time. And the same thing happened on the Palestinian side, where a majority moved from rejecting any Jewish presence to accepting the idea of two states. So I think this is the majority we have on both sides. We have to build on this. Today you have one of the most right-wing coalitions governments in Israel. So if you leave it to the government of Israel, all you will get is the biblical references, which are not going to help us. I just want to say one thing to Michelle Dunn, that I don't disagree with her. I'm not at all suggesting imposing or arms twisting. Leadership, American leadership, is not about imposing anything on the parties or arm twist them. It's about shouldering the political cost. It's about providing a vision that they know the parties would eventually accept, but that they cannot dare politically, because of their own constituencies and constraints, to come up with. This is what leadership in the region is about, and this is what has been lacking under Obama.
Can we just leave the Obama position on this for another time? But we've covered that quite well. I just want to bring up with you, Izzadeen, your position with regards to what you've been doing in Egypt, because the Egyptian situation in this is an interesting one, and the position of Hamas, where we began the show, is one that we need to touch on. Now, Hamas's role in all of this has been negated by everybody, even those who called for an election in the West, in Gaza in the first place. And Egypt hasn't been blameless in this, either in its approach to the Rafah crossing or in its help in giving the promised financial aid to the people of Gaza as well. What exactly is Egypt going to do here, and the broader Middle East's position in all of this going to play in these talks?
Well, there's a lot in your question, and let me start by the part on Hamas and its relationship to the current process, to the negotiation process, and its absence from it. Hamas has been absent from negotiations since negotiations started in Oslo and afterwards. Hamas chose not to join those negotiations. So I don't think that their absence today is the main challenge that faces these negotiations at all. I think we cannot ignore Hamas. We cannot pretend Hamas doesn't exist. Hamas has
But that's exactly that is exactly what is happening. We're pretending Hamas doesn't exist, and they're being ignored.
Not on the Egyptian side. I don't know what happened. You know, we have people on Ramallah and Washington to talk about that. But we're not pretending Hamas doesn't exist. We can't even pretend, even if we wanted to, because Hamas is next door. But what we're saying is, these negotiations have to take place with the Palestinian Authority. This is the only practical possibility available. Otherwise, we will go into interminable issues about recognition, mutual recognition, and so on. If those negotiations lead to anything, which we don't think they would, then whatever will be the result will have to be put to everyone, all the Palestinian people in Gaza and in the West Bank,
Diana,
and that will actually offer a context for reconciliation much better than the context we have today.
Diana, you started the show by saying that Israel's entire strategy over the past 40 to 60 years, depending on how you want to categorize this, has been to delay everything as long as they can until they get their facts on the ground, as they put it. So this can be seen in just that context, can't it?
No, it can't just be seen in that context. It's a little bit more complicated than that. It's a question of putting facts on the ground and having no international response to the facts on the ground that are being put in place. But there's also something that, if one can be a little bit more self-critical, this is also a lack of leadership on the Palestinian side. For the past 17 years, the Palestinian Authority, or the PLO, Fatah, has pursued one strategy and one strategy alone, and that is negotiations. They have failed completely to pursue any other strategy. And this is not just an indictment of Fatah, it's also an indictment against Hamas. They haven't pursued any other strategies, whether it's nonviolent strategies, whether it's advocacy strategies, diplomatic strategies, legal strategies. Their entire purpose has been simply negotiations, on the one side being Fatah, and Hamas on the other side criticizing that. So this has been it's been a marriage of Israel putting into place facts on the ground, the international community doing absolutely nothing about it, and a lack and weakened response on the part of the Palestinian Authority.
But Michelle, my point here was, and I still would like to see an answer as to what exactly can be achieved when you have an elected representative body like Hamas not even being involved in the negotiations. If, for instance, we see Benjamin Netanyahu giving some kind of concessions and Mahmoud Abbas giving some kind of concessions to the point where it can be declared progress, how is Hamas going to react?
Well, look, we have to remember, from a legal point of view, the PLO is the negotiating party. And up till now, Hamas is not part of the PLO, although it would like to be. And there certainly have been discussions about that, and even agreement about that at one point, that perhaps Hamas would be given entrance to the PLO. I think that the scenario that Ezzedine laid out, in which the PLO and Israel reach a negotiated agreement, and that's put to a referendum in the West Bank and Gaza, and that somehow allows the PLO and the Palestinian Authority just to bypass Hamas, is a very unrealistic scenario. First of all, we're all agreeing that we don't think there's going to be a negotiated agreement soon between the PLO and Israel. And even if there were, the whole idea that you could carry out a referendum over the objections of Hamas in Gaza and so forth, I think is really not going to happen. Hamas has tools at its disposal, including violence, that it could use to disrupt the whole process. So while I don't advocate that Hamas be somehow brought into the negotiations directly, I do think that some kind of a modus vivendi, a power-sharing arrangement, an agreement between the PLO, between Fatah and Hamas, is going to be necessary before the PLO is going to be able to reach any kind of an agreement with Israel.
Is that kind of modus vivendi likely to come about, Ezzedine?
No, it isn't likely to come about before an agreement is reached. And although I agree with most of what Michelle said, despite her best effort to disagree, but I think, yes, you cannot force a referendum or elections in Gaza against Hamas will. You cannot arm twist Hamas too much. I'm not saying this or suggesting it in any way. What I'm saying is, once you have an agreement that offers, or once you have a clear indication of what the agreement is looking like, that offers a context that enables the Arabs, Egypt and others, to bring more life to the reconciliation effort, and then to bring Hamas itself and the PA in Ramallah to this modus vivendi. I don't think you can do it in vacuum today because of many factors that we don't have time to go in this show.
All right, well,
but then you need to change the context and offer a positive horizon, a state for the Palestinians, and then bring Hamas and Fatah to fit in this scenario.
Diana, it seems the conclusion that a lot of people are going to draw from the comments of all three of you is that perhaps this particular event is going to end up doing more harm than good to the chances of peace.
It certainly is going to do more harm than good. In terms of the negotiations, yes, they will do more harm than good, because nothing is going to be achieved. Rather than, instead, it's actually going to be a worsening of the Palestinian situation. If you recall, from 1993 to the year 2000, when negotiations were taking place the first time, it was actually the period during which Israel expanded settlements the most in its history. So if that is an indication of of things to come, then we're going to see a worsening situation. While people are focused on handshakes and smiles, more homes are going to be demolished, more land is going to be confiscated, more settlements are going to go up, and so the situation is going to become worse. If there's one thing good that can come out of this, it's one, the viewpoint that negotiations are never going to lead to a resolution, and that it's actually repugnant for Palestinians to have to negotiate their freedom. And two, perhaps an international recognition that it's time to actually put pressure on Israel to finally withdraw, rather than trying to demand that the Palestinians turn into better human beings.
Azadine, you agree with that?
I don't think, I would not go as far as saying it would do more harm than good. I think it's the wrong approach to a political settlement in the region. But now that we have it, I think the best approach would be to shorten it, make it as short as intensive as possible, get through the clarification, testing, and all of that, and then move to the following step, which would be the United States, in consultation with the Quartet and others, putting a vision for peace in the region, and then starting the political process that would ensue. But the negotiations themselves, I think the shorter, the better, because it could be very ugly with all the expected settlement expansion projects and the reactions you will get from the Palestinians and from Hamas, who would, of course, use the opportunity to capitalize on it and so on. So the shorter, the better.
Michelle, this situation, this idea that perhaps more time may lead to better decisions, it hasn't really proven of any worth at all in the past 40 years, has it? What we are now talking about is 22% of what was initially Mandate Palestine, as determined after the creation of the State of Israel, what was supposed to be the remnants of a Palestinian state. 22%, and that even is being eroded as we speak. The possibility of a viable state is out of the question already, isn't it?
I don't know if it's out of the question already. I mean, certainly if a Palestinian state is created in, what are we talking about? Let's say 95% of the West Bank and all of Gaza, and some sort of connection between them, there could be a state. I mean, there would have to be very special arrangements with the neighbors when it comes to access to the outside world and commerce and security and all of that. But it is true that the passage of time does not favor that solution for many reasons, because the West Bank is being eaten up by settlement construction. Also, we haven't talked much about Israeli society, but there is a drift, I think, to the right in Israeli society, and a sense that, there's a growing population in Israel that is not interested in a solution.
That is a conversation we are going to have to leave for another day. I'm afraid we've run out of time. Thank you to all our guests. In Washington, D.C., Michelle Dunn; in Cairo, Azadine Shukri; and in Ramallah, Diana Batu. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We welcome your comments and suggestions, so do email us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. But for now, it's goodbye.